One of the first video essays I ever posted on this channel was about Sindri, examining the way his character unravels in God of War Ragnarok, how he begins as a goofy source of comedic relief, and then transforms into this character who has been broken by tragedy, who is revealed to possess unexpected emotional depth. I still think that is an extraordinary story arc. However, the more I've played Ragnarok, the more I feel that I completely missed a very key aspect of his character in that original video. And so the purpose of this video is to fill in that missing piece. What I've come to realize is that Sindri's character is, in some ways, shockingly similar to Odin. If you've seen my video on Odin, you will know that I believe his character is all about control. His primary motivation in this story is to control everything and everyone around him. He primarily controls through lies and manipulations, but when those do not work, he is very willing to exert control through violence instead. Even his pursuit of knowledge is centered on a desire for greater control. And it is this pursuit that destroys him in the end. In his last scene, Atreus gives him one last chance to make a different choice, to give up control, to let go, and Odin just cannot do it. The exact same thing actually happens to Sindri. Sindri cannot give up control either. He too is destroyed by an inability to let go. Now, Sindri's desire for and methods of control are far more benevolent than Odin's. Odin wants to control others to protect himself. In contrast, Sindri wants to control others to protect them, to keep the people he cares about safe. Instead of lies and manipulations and violence, Sindri utilizes gifts and favors and discussion to control the behavior of people around him. He never actually forces anyone to do anything. However, as benevolent as this motivation may be, it is just as self-destructive as Odin's, because true control over others is always ultimately impossible. In the end, it turns out that Odin never really had any true control at all. Not over his family, he is not able to stop Heimdall from dying in battle against Kratos, he is not able to prevent Thor from rejecting his tyranny. He does not even have control over himself. He kills Brok because he loses patience, is overcome by anger, drops his carefully crafted disguise for no purpose. In a similar way, Sindri is not able to stop Atreus from doing whatever Atreus wants to do, and he is not able to save his brother's life. To start, let's talk about Sindri's obsession with cleanliness. Sindri is a clean freak. It's one of his most notable characteristics. This is usually played up as a source of comedy. For example, in this scene, he asks Kratos and Atreus to wipe their feet before entering his house, and then to his consternation, they just ignore him. He cleans up the mess, and then immediately Brok barges in, making an even bigger mess, and poor Sindri's cleaning efforts are ruined. Ha ha ha, ho ho ho. But that cleanliness is very revealing, because by constantly trying to keep his environment neat and tidy and pristine, that's really an attempt to assert control over his environment, to force his surroundings to comply with his personal desires, his view of how the world should be ordered and organized. And it is exactly because he is unable to force the people around him to behave the way he wants them to, that his attempts at keeping his environment under control always fail. In contrast, his brother Brok has a far more laid-back attitude. Brok does not try to control his environment. He lets it be dirty and messy, and he is shown to be far happier and more relaxed than Sindri. Of course, this is a silly sort of example. It does not really matter whether or not Sindri tries to keep things clean, and it does not matter when he ultimately fails to do so. There are no real consequences to that failure. However, his obsession with cleanliness is representative of a much larger and more profound flaw within his character, because this desire for control extends far beyond just objects. Sindri spends a lot of time in this story trying to keep both Brok and Atreus safe, and his inability to do so is what leads to tragedy. Let's start with Brok. Early on in the game, Sindri tells a story about how he once saved his brother's life, and we're going to listen to that story together. As you listen, I want you to try to think about what Sindri's true motivations were. What is the real reason why he fought so hard to keep his brother alive? Okay, here it is.
Long before you were born, there was an accident at the forge. Brok died. I couldn't accept it. I went to the Lake of Souls in Alfheim to steal him back. Legions of souls tried to stop me. I can still feel them crawling all over my skin. Thing is, I could only get 3 of his 4 soul parts back.
Sindri.
Brok just thought he got knocked out. I've been lying to him ever since. It's been eating at me lately.
You have to tell him. He has a right to know.
When the time is right. As should you with your father.
That's not the same thing. Anyway, you did a good thing. You saved Brok's life. I caused trouble.
No. I made a choice. One that wasn't mine to make.
What do you mean, a choice?
I couldn't be alone. The other dwarves, when they saw him, they shunned us. So we left. Made our own home.
Notice the language he uses to describe this event. He does not say, "I did this for Brok." Instead, he says, "I could not accept it." Even according to his own story, he did not save his brother's life for his brother's sake. He did it for his own sake. He was the one who needed Brok to live. As far as we know, Brok was perfectly content to accept his own death. And this is absolutely a form of control. In the moment that he tore Brok's spirit from the Well of Souls, he also seized Brok's fate in his own hands. And this has consequences. As a result of Sindri's choices, Brok permanently lost part of his soul. Eventually, it will be revealed that because Brok is missing that part of his soul is not capable of finding its way to an afterlife. So when Brok dies, he just dies. And that is Sindri's fault. The writers could have framed this story in a very different way. They could have made this seem like, oh, what a good guy Sindri is. When his brother died, he fought so hard to bring him back, to give him another chance at life, because Brok's work is important, because having Brok around makes the world a better place. But instead, they choose to make it very clear that this was wrong. That's the point of Atreus' dialogue. He presents that possible other interpretation. You did a good thing, you saved your brother's life. And the writers immediately dismiss that perspective by having Sindri explicitly say, "No, I made a choice. I was the one who could not handle being alone. I was the one who could not let go." The writers want to make it very clear that, at least in this story, it is wrong to seize the reins of someone else's fate against their wishes, especially when driven by selfish motivations the way Sindri is. Pursuing total control always has consequences. And what turns this story into a tragedy is that Sindri never truly learns this lesson. He can never let go of Brok's fate, and that inability to let go will eventually completely destroy him. But we'll talk about that more a bit later. During his time with Atreus, Sindri says something else that I think is absolutely pivotal to understanding his character. So let's listen to that together. Here it is.
Why are you worrying so much today?
I just need to look out for the people I care about. Keeps bad things from happening to them.
This is Sindri's primary motivation throughout the entire game. More than anything else, he wants to keep the people he cares about safe. In some ways, this is a very noble motivation. Sindri is someone who cares very deeply for the people around him, for his friends and his family. But as he revealed in that previous scene, there's a selfish aspect here too. He is keeping them safe, at least as much for himself as for them. In my previous video on his character, I focused a great deal on how much assistance Sindri provides to Kratos and Atreus over the course of these 2 Norse games, and how he never ever asks for anything in return. He possesses a seemingly boundless generosity, which is mirrored in his infinite bag of treasures that he wields in battle. In the previous game, he provides them with upgrades for their weapons. He's the one who gives Atreus the mistletoe, which ultimately kills Baldur. He provides them with new arrow types, which are essential for completing their journey. And then in Ragnarok, he gives them a place to stay in his own home, provides them with a means to travel between realms, gives them a compass, then a light source. He travels with Atreus early on and helps helps keep him safe. He gives them so much. And in this dialogue, he reveals why he is doing all this, to keep them safe. It is important to understand that he does not just want them to be safe. It is a compulsive need, even an obsession. He cannot function psychologically without doing this. And for this reason, from the very beginning of the story, Sindri is doomed. Because it is just not possible for him to keep everyone safe. Not even the gods in this series have the power to do this. What chance does a mortal like Sindri have? It is a simple fact of life that bad things are going to happen to the people we care about. You cannot stop that. You just have to accept it as part of life. This part of the story reminds me of the Serenity Prayer, which you have probably heard some version of before. It goes something like, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Sindri's basic flaw is that he does not possess this serenity. He cannot accept the things he cannot change. In some ways, this is admirable. Sindri will never give up. He cares too much. He loves Brok too much to just sit by and do nothing. In this way, Sindri also serves as a foil to both Kratos and Atreus. Kratos and Atreus have very similar motivations in this story. Kratos wants to do everything he can to keep Atreus safe, which leads him to being far too controlling and driving his son away, while Atreus wants to prevent the prophecy of his father's death from coming true, which leads him to make totally reckless and dangerous decisions, to fall headfirst into Odin's manipulations. However, unlike Sindri, both Kratos and Atreus grow and learn over the course of the story. One of the most important scenes in the entire game is the one where Kratos finally lets go, when he gives up on trying to control Atreus' fate, when he allows his son to go back to Asgard alone, even knowing that it will be dangerous. At the end of the game, they both let go. They both go their separate ways, which is something Sindri is never able to do. But we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here. What I want to do next is to discuss Sindri's relationship with Atreus. By the beginning of Ragnarok, Sindri and Atreus have grown much closer than they were in the last game. In the time between games, they have already gone on a bunch of little adventures together. They clearly think of each other as family, and it's really sweet. It's a really touching development. But their relationship is not as healthy as it at first seems. Their relationship is mostly made up of Atreus wanting to do all these crazy, reckless things, and Sindri saying no, 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 no. Because Atreus is this precocious child growing into a reckless young adult, trying to forge his own path through life, making his own mistakes. No matter how much Sindri tries to persuade or argue or push and pull Atreus into doing this instead of that, to choose a safer option, none of it ever works. Atreus just keeps on doing whatever he wants to do. Atreus is a bit of a brat in this story. He does not listen to his elders. Early on, there is a scene where Atreus wants to go see Freya, and Sindri tries all these different tactics to stop him from doing that. He explains in 100 different ways that it is too dangerous. He tries to get Atreus to just meet the World Serpent instead, to just go home after that fails. And of course, none of it works. Despite all of Sindri's efforts, Atreus still goes to meet Freya. This basic exchange happens between them over and over again, and eventually it actually starts to destroy their relationship. To see what I mean, we're going to watch 2 more short scenes together. Here they are.
You better screw his head back on, and I mean tightly.
What's got everyone caterwauling all of a sudden?
Atreus wants to go to Asgard.
Asgard? Get kicked in the head or something?
Great. I guess everybody's against me now. Just leave me alone.
Listen.
Let go of me!
Listen!
Let go!
What the fuck?
Atreus! It's Sindri. Just try to keep control!
It is very significant to me that it is Sindri who is mauled by Atreus when he transforms into that bear. That it is Sindri who tries to talk Atreus down there. And of course it is even more significant that he fails. Sindri is suffering some very real, very physical consequences from trying and failing to control Atreus' behavior. He would not have been mauled by that bear if he had simply stepped aside and let Atreus go. But Sindri is very literally not capable of stepping aside. That would go against the core of his character. He always has to try. We see in that earlier argument where they are both shouting at each other, where it seems like Sindri cannot stand Atreus anymore, that their relationship has deteriorated in a major way by this point in the story. At the start of the game, they were such close friends, partners going on adventures together. But now that friendship is reaching a breaking point, and it's all because Sindri just cannot give up control. Listen to the words he uses. You better screw his head back on, and I mean tightly. He is telling Kratos, you have to take control of his behavior because I have failed to do so. And of course Kratos fails too. Everyone fails. In the story of God of War, attempts at control always end in failure, especially when it comes to Loki. That is half of every story in Norse mythology. If you try to control Loki or predict what he is going to do next, you are usually going to fail in some hilarious or terrible way. That is his role as the archetypical trickster god. To understand the full weight of the tragedy that this leads to, we are going to watch 2 more cutscenes, and these will be a bit longer. First, we're going to watch the scene where Brok dies, and then we're going to watch Sindri's reaction. As you watch, I want to ask you a question. Imagine that the writers of this game decided to make a different choice. What if they decided to have Sindri learn his lesson by the time of Brok's death? What would that scene look like? How would his character's behavior be different? What would giving up control actually mean for him? Okay, here it is.
Please, you have to save him. You have to. He can't. You can't. Maybe if I go back to the lake.
Stop me. I know what you've done. And I forgive you. But you gotta stop. You gotta let go.
Brok.
Sindri, I'm so sorry.
No. No, I don't want to hear it. You don't know what sorry means.
We're not letting Odin get away with this.
Would that be the Odin you invited into my home?
We were all fooled.
But some of us were bigger fools than others, aren't we? I gave you everything. My skills, my friendship, my home, my secrets, my treasures. And you just kept taking. And now what have I got? Not even my family. You want sorry? This is what sorry looks like.
What can we do?
We. There is no we. There's only you. No matter what the cost. So what you can do is get the fuck out of my sight.
As Brok is dying, Sindri desperately attempts to reassert control over his fate. First, he begs Freya to help, even if it means letting Odin get away, and then when that fails, his mind begins racing, searching for something, anything he can do to stop this. He says, maybe if I go back to the Lake of Souls, maybe if I do this, maybe if I do that. Then Brok's final words are, "You've gotta stop. You've got to let go." I do not think that Brok is only referring to his own death here. I really think he's referring to everything. Brok knows that his brother has to stop trying to control everything and everyone, because it will destroy him. Unfortunately, Brok's final words come too late. As we see in the following scene, Sindri's character has already been shattered. In that second scene, we are watching a truly broken man. Something interesting here is that, in some ways, Sindri has actually started to let go. Notice that he's no longer wearing his gloves when he works at the forge. He no longer cares about whether he gets dirty. This represents him letting go of that obsession with cleanliness, which, as we discussed earlier, was only a smaller symptom of a larger disease related to his need for control. But I think this is evidence less of a choice to let go, and more of him simply giving up, which is not the same thing. In this scene, it is actually Atreus who is trying and failing to take control of the situation. It is Atreus who says there must be something I can do, but there isn't. At this point in the story, they have lost all control over events. From here, they all sort of just fall into the prophesied battle of Ragnarok. Events play themselves out almost entirely on their own. If this were a video about Kratos and Atreus, it would be worth digging into the ways they actually managed to, eventually, resist prophecy and take control over their own fates. But of course, this is not a video about them. We are going to stay focused on Sindri. My question before we watched those two scenes was, what would letting go actually look like for him? How would it change his behavior? And I think a Sindri who is able to accept Brok's death, to accept his inability to control the fate of people he cares about, would not have been totally shattered in the same way. Of course, he still would have gone through a period of mourning, he still would have been devastated, but I do not think he would have blamed Atreus. It is interesting that, back during their journey in Midgard together, which we watched a little of earlier in this video, when Atreus expresses doubt over whether he ever should have freed Tyr in the first place, Sindri actually reassures him. He says, "You did a good thing. You saved someone's life." Earlier in the story, Sindri was able to recognize that saving Tyr was the right thing to do. And if he was in an emotionally healthier place in this later scene, he probably still would have understood that no one is to blame for Brok's death but Odin, the one who actually killed him. But his character has been so totally broken at this point that he blames everyone. He hates everyone. He is consumed by anger and grief. Let's move on to the story's conclusion and epilogue. At the very end of the game, after our heroes have defeated Odin, they don't seem to know what to do next. They all just sort of stand around and stare at each other. And then it is Sindri who steps in and takes control of the situation. He literally rips the marble out of Atreus' hand, symbolically seizing control of the narrative. He is the one who ultimately destroys Odin. Something sort of similar happens during Brok's funeral. After Brok's body has been sent down the river, Kratos tries to speak to Sindri, and then watch what Sindri does. Here it is.
Sindri. Blackpuss.
Without speaking, without saying a word, just with his aggressive body language, this is Sindri once again seizing control of the situation, in the exact same way he did when he destroyed Odin. This is the next chapter for Sindri's character. Instead of trying to exert control through gifts and favors, he is going to exert control through basic aggression. At the end of Ragnarok, Sindri is in a very similar position to Kratos at the end of God of War 3. He is a man who has successfully accomplished his revenge, but lost absolutely everything on the journey. This is the paradox of love. For Kratos and Atreus, their love for each other becomes a source of great strength. For a while, it does cause them to make a lot of mistakes, but eventually it drives them both to be better, to grow. But for Sindri, his love for Brok actually ends up being his greatest weakness. It destroys him. Losing Brok causes him to lose everything, his own soul, everything that made him who he was. This is actually touched on in the Valhalla epilogue. At the end of Valhalla, there is this long cutscene in which Kratos confronts himself, has this whole monologue in which he discusses his own character and his own choices. At one point, he asks himself, if I lost everything, meaning if I lost the people I love, would I become the same angry, violent monster again? Am I just one tragedy away from becoming what Sindri became after his brother's death? And Kratos chooses no, he chooses hope. Whatever tragedy may come, he will keep fighting to remain the better man he has become. This is the same realization that Sindri needs to have. If there's any character that would really benefit from a journey through Valhalla, from an opportunity to explore their choices, to truly understand themselves, it would be Sindri. God of War has become a story where, no matter what terrible mistakes they may have made in the past, characters are able to grow and make better choices. This gives me a lot of hope for Sindri's future. While his obsessive concern for the safety of others may have been unhealthy and self-destructive, it also led him to do so many genuinely good things. Healing his relationship with Brok was the right thing to do. Helping Kratos and Atreus was the right thing to do. Welcoming Tyr into his home, a broken man without a home of his own, was the right thing to do. None of those were mistakes, and they were all driven by love. Caring for others is so central to Sindri's character that I think eventually, on the other side of grief, he will not be able to stop himself from doing it again. He is going to build a new home and a new family. At the end of Ragnarok, we are seeing him at his most broken, but that is not how he will be forever. Whenever we encounter Sindri again in the future, however long from now that might be, I believe we will encounter a character who is still driven by love and who is still choosing to do the right thing.